All right, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our very last episode of our show entitled It's Good to Know. And again, before anything else, please allow me to introduce myself. I am Kimi Antonio, a college freshman from Ateneo de Manila, majoring in Communications Technology Management. I am a devoted musician, and some of you were asking, I do play the saxophone, guitar, and the piano, but what's most important to know about me is that I am a first-time voter. I registered only last January of this year, and once again, I am your wonderful host for this webinar. Now, what is this It's Good to Know webinar? Well, we're having our part 3 already, so most of you should already know. But for those who are just tuning to us for the first time, well, the Parish Pastoral Council for Responsible Voting, or PPCRV as we all know, has this webinar as part of their initial voter education efforts. But what's interesting about this webinar is that it's a three-part technical series. So the presentations, the questions, and the discussions we'll have are all going to be focused on the technical aspects of our elections. And the first two episodes, we had the topics, what is a VCM or vote counting machine with Tito Henry Aguda. And for part two, we have Tito William Yu for the topic, how does the transmission of votes happen? If you missed the first two episodes, again, no worries. You can find them under the video section of the PPCRV Facebook page. And for this afternoon, our part three and very last episode, we will learn about how does PPCRV do parallel counting. But before I introduce our speaker for this afternoon, let's just again quickly have another getting to know you session and the very last getting to know you session. So most of you know the drill. There are just some questions we'll flash and kindly put in your answers quickly. For those following us via live stream or Facebook, please write in your questions write in your answers, in the comment section. So for our first question of the It's Good to Know webinar series, it asks, how young or old are you? And, how do you feel right now? So the choices are very open-ended. So the first one is, I am young and I feel relaxed lang, no, chill, enjoy your young age, no stress. Or I am young, but I'm very concerned about our country's future, as many of us should be. Or three, I am old, but I feel young. No, you have that flame still inside of you. Or I am old and I feel tired already. You've been working your whole life and you just want to relax? Or are you a bit of a chameleon in the sense that neither young nor old and just simply excited to what else can be in store for our country as long as we have hope? No? So very, very interesting choices. So I'll give you guys some time to put in your answers. All right. So question two asks, how many times have you attended our It's Good to Know series? No, have you attended part one? Have you attended part two? Or this is your very first time to attend? No, our last episode of the series. So again, kindly put in your answers. And then finally, our last question for our last poll is, have you been a PPCRV volunteer? No, it's either, yes, I have been a volunteer. No, I have not been a volunteer. Or do you want to volunteer for our elections in 2022? No, you want to start volunteering. So again, put in your answers. Okay, I think that gives you enough time to put in your answers, and we shall see the survey results very soon. All right, so a lot of interesting results now. So here it says, so for our results of the poll, with the first question, how young or old are you and how do you feel? It's very nice to see that many of us are neither young nor old. We are just simply excited of what else can be in store for our country as long as we have hope. No, it's very nice to see that 35% of our audience, the majority, believes in this. So number two, how many times have you attended our It's Good to Know series? No, a great majority, 52% actually attended part two. And the last question is, have you been a PPCRV volunteer? And again, 83% of us says yes. So yon, it's very nice to get an insight on our actual audience, especially as this is our last webinar episode. So later on, as we're listening to the presentations, again, please feel free to write your comments in our Zoom chat box. Or for those following us via live stream, write in your questions in the comment section. We'll try to answer them as much as we could during our Q&A portion. And now, let me get on with introducing our speaker for this afternoon. So guys, this very cool guy has been immersed in IT even before he graduated from college and has participated in quite a few pioneering IT initiatives. For example, during a time when maps were not yet in vogue, he led a team that created the first locally available online map of the Philippines. He was with the group that implemented the first Find Precinct system in 2001 and 2004. And when PPCRV needed a system to conduct the unofficial parallel count during the first automated elections back in 2010, he and his team provided that system. Right now, he's the head for applications delivery at CyberSoft Content Services Incorporated. He is a member of the PPCRV Board of Trustees and a proud PPCRV volunteer since 2001. When he is not behind his computer, he relaxes by playing with his dogs, taking photos, or tinkering with his nice collection of fountain pens. Again, please join me in welcoming the very young at heart and absolutely the very tech at heart, Mr. Rommel Bernardo.
Okay. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Today I'm going to talk about how PPCRV does its parallel count. Let me start by going through what was discussed by William in the last presentation. If you will recall, hold on, if you recall, the VCMs transmit to several different destinations. One path takes you to the municipal board of canvassers, which now relays it to the provincial board of canvassers and the national board of canvassers. Another path of transmission is to the central server, which is the one that publishes the data on the Comlec website. By the way, this red line on top means that in case that there are any ERs that have to be manually uploaded, people physically take the SD cards from the VCMs, pack them in envelopes, seal them with uh, the appropriate materials, and then bring them to the municipal board of canvassers physically. Now, the central server has a backup server so that in case anything happens to it, the results still get published on the Comlec website. Now, lastly, the third path is through the transparency server, where, as William mentioned last time, you have several recipients, including the majority party, the minority, dominant minority party, the KBP or Kilusang Broadcaster ng Pilipinas, the Accredited Citizens Arm, which is uh, the PPCRB, and of course the other media partners like back then you had ABS-CBN, GMA, you had Rappler, Inquirer, and a few other media outfits. Now, when it gets sent to us, we receive it at the PPCRV command center. Now, normally we just look at this particular portion of the transmission because that's what's quickly uploaded and that's what everyone gets to see immediately. But very little attention is given to the last item, which is the printed electronic return. If you will recall from the first webinar that was conducted by my colleague Henry, he said that each VCM at the close of polls will print 8 copies of an election return from that particular precinct alone. That's prior to transmission. That's prior to attaching any transmission device to the VCM. In other words, when the Board of Election Inspectors or Electoral Board decides to close the polls at a given time, the only thing that the VCM is attached to is a power source. There's no transmission device. It prints 8 copies of the election returns, and then those copies are folded, sealed, and sent to the designated recipients, one of which is PPCRV. Now, for today's talk, I'd like to focus on how this electronic path and this analog path come together so that we can do an unofficial parallel count that's credible. Okay, now what are the mandates of the PPCRV? One is to perform an unofficial parallel count using data from the transparency server. And second, since we have a printed copy of the election turn, we compare the data coming from the transparency server against what is printed in the election return. Again, I'd like to remind you that what is printed was done prior to transmission. Okay. So if anybody's thinking, something must have gone wrong during the transmission, well, you have a printed copy that can tell you what was in the machine prior to transmission. Okay. Right, next. Now, the data from the transparency server normally looks like this. It's a text file with the names of the precincts, the candidates, and the votes. These things are sent to our command center, where you can see it on our lovely little video wall, and the results typically look like this. Okay, that's what we normally see. Now, what about the printed election return coming from the VCMs? Those nice little pieces of thermal paper with all that electoral information on it. Well, this is what happens to it. From all over the country, our volunteers gather those printed election returns and bring them to our headquarters here at the Popeye Center along UN Avenue in Manila. Okay. And what do we do with them? Well, as soon as they come in, this is how they look like in those envelopes. Our volunteers take them out, sort them, do an inventory of what's already there, and they prepare them for encoding. Now, what exactly do we encode? Our volunteers, um, we have several hundred of which reporting to the command center at any given time, actually read through each national position and code it into our own homegrown system. And this is something that we do not once but twice. Okay. Now, volunteers can come from all walks of life. We have professionals, we have students, we have the elderly, we have people from the clergy, we have uh, some are even children, just like this young fellow who was highlighted during one of our uh, command center operations. Now, the system that we have has slots for the different electoral positions that we're looking at, let's say for president, for vice president, and for senator. Once they have been encoded twice, the first pass and second pass are compared against each other. And if there are any discrepancies between the first pass and the second pass, these things are then sent to a senior PPCRV member. Sometimes it may be a member of the seminarians or the clergy who are volunteering with us, so they can now see where the discrepancy came from. Because normally, when something is encoded, uh, there's a tendency to have some encoding errors in it. So what we do is we do a blind double pass system and we also have a separate team that does conflict resolution at the end. Now, what does this actually do? Once we have encoded the printed election results, we're going to compare it against what was transmitted electronically for each precinct, for each candidate that we encoded for. For instance, in the case of the president, are the electronically transmitted results the same as the manually encoded results? Same thing goes for the vice president, same thing goes for the senators. Okay. Now, in the course of comparison, we say, okay, the votes for the president for this precinct are fine. The votes for the vice presidential candidates are okay, but oops, we spotted a discrepancy here among the senators. What do we do if that happens? In those cases, we just file an exception report and send it to the authority that can act upon it, which is the COMELEC. It should be noted that in our capacity as citizens arm, our duty to the COMELEC is to report anything that we see that's not uh, that shows a discrepancy or an exception. So in case we do spot one, we file an exception report and send it to the COMELEC for them to resolve. Okay. Now, again, I'd just like to remind everyone that what we're looking at is not just this portion with the blue arrows, but we're looking at the portion of the blue arrows and the green arrow. So in effect, if you're going to go through this path and you're going to look at the printed ERs at the end, it's like we're auditing the results that come in. Tama ba yung pinadala sa transparency server? And what is our basis? The printed election return. Some quarters within PPCRV would like to call it the virgin or unaltered election return because it is printed prior to transmission. Okay. Now, how did it look like? Out of what we received in 2019, 60,139 were present in the transparency server and were encoded using our operations. We compared those 6,139 encoded and 6,139 transmitted and found only three exceptions. That is a matching rate of 99.995% of all those things we compared, all those election returns that we compared. Now, I'd consider that one a very high match. I think it's even better than doing an RMA. But then again, this is something we do for the country. Now, to summarize, what we do in PPCRV is not just poll watching, it's not just voters education. Our unofficial pilot count is actually a very big step in ensuring that the results, as transmitted, whether it's through analog or digital pathways, are correct and accurate. Uh, to summarize the process that we do, we encode each printed election return twice and pass it through a quality assurance system that includes a double-blind data entry system, which is created by us. We did not rely on an external vendor to provide it. We wrote the system ourselves. Now we compare those electronically transmitted results against what was encoded using our system. And if there are any mismatches, we push it to another quality assurance system. If there are any exceptions that pass through that one, those are reported to the COMELEC. Okay. Now, all of these things are possible because we have very kind-hearted volunteers who care a lot about our country. We have students. We have people from the local parish pastoral councils who go to our office. We have employees from different offices who take time out from their work and visit us. We have people from the PW sector. We have people from the young and the young at heart. We also have those who from the elderly. In fact, one of our oldest volunteers was around 86 years old and is still very active in PPCRV. Now, our job as poll watchers does not just take us to nice offices or schools where we look at the polls. Some of our volunteers go above and beyond by actually escorting some of the equipment from where they're deployed in Manila to their final destinations in the respective cities and municipalities. Some do it by boat, some ride on horses, some even walk through mountains and trails just to bring it to the designated schools. Now, we'd like to thank all our volunteers nationwide, those at the Voters Assistance Desk, the precinct and BOC poll watchers, the local parallel count volunteers, and of course, the command center volunteers and many other people who fulfill their roles as volunteers of PPCRV. And thank you for bringing those physical ERs to our command center because this thing allows us to perform our mandate as citizens arm to Comelec and as we want to call it guardians of our election process here in the country. That's it for me for today. Kimmy, back to you.
Okay, Tito Ramel. I think that was a very nice presentation. No, it's really nice to see the background scenes of our election process, and I feel like you actually answered most of the questions that I wanted to ask you. But actually, we have questions on our chat box and also on Facebook that I'll be reading them to you shortly. So we actually have a question from Facebook, no, from Jerwin Mark. He asked, how does one volunteer to work for PPCRV here in the province po?
Okay. PPCRV has local chapters. You can probably contact the local PPCRV coordinators in case you need to know who the coordinators are. You can leave your in your diocese.
Ooh, okay, okay. So
Yeah, and
for
just
those
to
who
add,
are,
Kimi,
sige,
if you'd allow
sige.
me to add, so you can also go to your nearest parish. So I think Jerwin Mark is from Davao. So we have a very active PPCRV group there. So you can actually either go to your nearest parish. It doesn't matter which one, so the nearest one, or you can coordinate with the diocesan coordinators, which you can actually reach out to us as well. Then, if you want to participate as a group, you can actually reach out to me as well, Jerwin. Thank you.
Mhm.
All right. So yeah, for those who are interested, feel free to volunteer. No, it's very exciting to be part. So let's see kung may questions pa tayo. Uh, parang wala naman questions tayo. Let's see your Zoom chat box. Wait lang. Parang it looks to be no questions, no? I feel like you answered a lot of the questions that
Well, in effect,
that-
Kimi, what we do at the command center is the culmination of everything that William and Henry discussed in the past few webinars. Um, in effect, when Henry was discussing the VCM, he was discussing, okay, this is how the process starts. This is what you voters do when you submit your ballot into the machine. It gets scanned, it gets tabulated, and it prints an election return at the end of the day. Then William talks about how does it get to the different parties that need it, including COMELEC, the political parties, and through the official path, which eventually leads to the proclamation. Now, all that I did was summarize and tie the knot at the end of the process to show them that yes, PPCRV is not just watching the voting process itself. In effect, PPCRV looks at what data are available, whether it's to the analog part and compares it to so that at the end of the day we can say, oh, we compared so many ballots from so many not ballots, so many printed election returns against their electronic counterparts, and you have a matching rate of 99.995%. I guess at that ratio, I mean, that's nothing to sneeze at, right? I mean, uh, thanks to all our volunteers, PPCRB has transitioned from the old analog phase of voting into the electronic age of voting quite seamlessly. And we'd like to thank all our volunteers for making that possible.
hmm. Sige, Tito Ramel, to connect with that. I have a question myself, no? So do we have to be good with technology, no? Do we have to like know our way around the computer to be able to volunteer po?
That won't be necessary because PPCRB is not just all about computers, and there are still other sectors like voters education, like um, poll watching on the day itself, like assisting people on the day of the election, like disseminating information about how our elections are conducted. Those things don't necessarily require the use of a computer, but If you'd like to volunteer for work at the command center, if you'd like to help us out there, of course, being computer literate would help. But it's not
Mm.
necessary to do all the work, not necessary in all aspects of what PPCRB's mandate as far as elections are concerned.
Ooh, okay. So again, once again, if of you in the audience are interested to volunteer, feel free to volunteer. Try to make a change. So if there are no more questions in the Zoom chat box or Facebook, I believe we can move on. But again, if a question just popped into your mind after this webinar, feel free to continue following us on Facebook and Twitter, and we will get back to you with the answers. So before we close and conclude this whole It's Good to Know webinar series, and to again give us a few words of inspiration and to push those who haven't registered yet, for this week, let us welcome the tireless Executive Director of PPCRV, Ms. Maribel Bueno Obra.
Salamat, Kimi. Magandang hapon po sa ating lahat. Sa ngalan po ng aming chairperson, si Ms. Myla Villanueva, ako po ay nagpapasalamat sa mga lumahok, nakinig at nanood po sa ikatlong yugto ng It's Good to Know. Sana'y nakatulong ito sa pagbigay ng kaalaman ng parallel count na isinasagawa ng PPCRV sa panahon ng eleksyon. Nananawagan po kami sa mga hindi pa nagparehistro na pupunta na po kayo sa local COMELEC offices para magparehistro. Tumaya po tayo at makilahok sa 2022 national and local elections. Angkinin natin ang karapatang bumoto. At sa mga kabataang nakikinig ngayon, sali na kayo sa PPCRV, mag-volunteer na, makibahagi sa kasaysayan. Halina kayo, tumahak tayo ng bagong kinabukasan para sa ating bayan. Muli, magandang hapon po sa ating lahat. Salamat at hanggang sa susunod nating pagkikita, ingat po tayong lahat.
Okay, thank you so much, Tita Maribel. No, as she said, sa mga kabataan, do your best to volunteer, make a change in this country. And to everyone, before we end, it is my honor to introduce some more special guests from PPCRV on the Zoom call we're having. So, titos and titas, please turn on your videos so you can wave and say hi in a few words to everyone watching now. So, we have our speaker during part 2 episode, How Does Transmission of Votes Happen? Dr. William Yu.
Hi, good afternoon. And I just like to reiterate the call of our Executive Director, Maribel. Please register kasi yung deadline po, September 30, malapit na po yun. Thank you.
Ayon. And then we have another special guest, no? A member of PPCRV's Board of Trustees, Dr. Arwin Serrano. Hello po, Doc.
Hey, Doc Arvin.
Nakamute po kayo ata.
Ayun, pwede na, magsalita ka na. Ay, may problema yata yung microphone. Pero sige, next time.
Sige. So,
Anyway,
and
Dr.
to
Arvin Serrano.
introduce... Sige. Hi po, Doc. So, to introduce our next guest, it's another member of PPCRV's Board of Trustees, Ms. Riza Mantaring.
Yeah. Hi, good
Riza
afternoon.
pala.
Yes. Hi, good afternoon. Sorry I can't turn on my video, pero for all of those listening, I hope you vote, you register to vote kasi importante talaga yung elections natin next year.
Sige. And then for our very last guest, again from the Board of Trustees of PPCRV, we have Ms. Agnes Hervasio. Ayun, sabi daw niya that she has some technical difficulties. That's why she's on her phone. But again, she'd like to wish hi to our audience. So again, thank you so much to all our titos and titas for attending the webinar we have today. So it's good to know that you're all here to make sure you always have a clean, honest, accurate, meaningful, and peaceful elections. So everyone, I hope it's been a truly good afternoon to all of you. Thank you for being part of our It's Good to Know webinar series. We really hope that you guys have learned a lot from our 3 episodes. So once again, I'm Kimi Antonio, encouraging all of you to register to vote. Thank you and goodbye.